Good morning, everybody. We are moving on to the next position, and today we are doing running back. We are taking a look at running back, and we're going to do, I believe, 2 videos today on free agent running backs. And of course, when you're considering the position of running back, the specific situation your team finds itself in should be considered. And the Seahawks are coming off a season where they had the best rookie running back in the league and second place runner-up for Rookie of the Year in Ken Walker. In fact, he got more first place votes than anybody for Rookie of the Year. So, I mean, you could almost call him Rookie of the Year, and you'd at least have a little bit of a leg to stand on. Any other year, he would have been. But either way, whether he won the award or not, Ken Walker, young player on the entering his second year of a rookie deal, had 1,200 yards, was efficient, didn't fumble, had some limited effectiveness as a receiver, nothing over the top, but good player. Clearly deserving of being a bell cow type back. Or, well, bell cow has some connotations that I don't necessarily like. So let's say a lead back. Clearly worthy of being a lead back in this league. He's got a little bit of everything in his repertoire. Really good player. And you've also got DJ Dallas, who I'm not going to act like I'm in love with him or anything, but he had some really good games at really vital moments for the Seahawks last year. And I'm definitely going to keep an eye on him as he goes into his contract year. So we don't need to invest huge resources at the running back position, especially in free agency. Maybe in the draft, you could at least make an argument that you could use a high pick on a running back in the draft. Because when you draft a running back, he's going to be cheap, he's going to be young, he's going to give you his best years, those first 3, 4, 5 years. That is arguable. But when you get to free agency, I think that you have to be a little bit more stringent about the kind of guys you go after. You don't want to give anybody big money, because anybody who's in line for a big money contract is probably already got several years of wear and tear on their body, and probably doesn't have a ton of juice left in their tank. And you also don't want to get anybody who's particularly old, because you don't need to. There are so many guys out there who are going to be on the right side of 30. You don't need to mess around with the guys who are on the wrong side of 30. So in free agency, especially with the way the Seahawks are right now with Ken Walker, there's no need to spend big money on one-star running back. So that's going to remove a lot of guys from consideration, and I'm not really going to be talking about those guys. But there are a lot of guys who are worth talking about, starting with, this guy was one of my favorites a couple years ago. It's Jamaal Williams of the Detroit Lions. Now, obviously the Seahawks have a special affinity for this guy because he helped us get into the playoffs this year, but beyond just that, this was a guy who was a very productive backup player for the Packers for 4 years, very effective. And then he went to Detroit, and this most recent year blew up. 1,000 yards, 17 touchdowns. Not a prolific receiver, admittedly, although that could have more to do with the system he's in than anything else. But he had a breakout year. And Jamaal Williams, not a big name. Not somebody who's going to get the big Saquon contract. He's not somebody who's going to get the big, even like the Kareem Hunt contract. Probably not going to get the big money, despite just having this good year. I think that even though he did have a very productive year in 2022, there will be some caution there because he was part of a really good offensive system. And admittedly, his yards per attempt were not that high, but this guy had a great nose for the end zone. And at the age of 27, he just had his best year. You got to figure he's got at least a couple good years left, turning 28 this offseason. PFF thought he played well in 2022 as well, so it's not like they were thumbing him down or anything. Not in love with his receiving ability, but that seems fair. He did very little of that. Now, Spotrac actually has a contract projection for this guy of $4.1 million a year. 2 years, $8.4 million. That might be a little bit low, but when you really think about it, the big running back money is going to go to guys like Saquon Barkley and Miles Sanders, and there might not be a ton of money left for a guy like a Jamaal Williams, who is clearly not as desirable as those guys. So it might be something like 2 years, $10 million, And I would be willing to go up there for the right guy. So Jamaal Williams would be at least a consideration for me, even if the price was more like for 2 years, $5 million a year. Donta Foreman, who we remember personally because he kind of beat us up in that week 13, week 14 game, and had a really nice end of the season run for the Carolina Panthers, would be another guy. He's going to turn 27 this offseason, age not really a big concern, and he's really kind of burst onto the scene in these last 2 years. He filled in for Derrick Henry fairly well in 2021, and then this most recent year, he had almost 1,000 yards from scrimmage, was fairly efficient, and seems like he's starting to become just one of those guys who hangs around in the league for an extended period of time and then manages to catch on, finds the right situation for him. He runs with a good amount of power. There's not a ton of wear and tear on him. He's got less than 500 career touches, so definitely something here. So Donta Foreman, PFF liked him as well. Again, not a huge fan of his ability as a receiver. And you go back to the previous year, 2021, you can see that actually they gave him a lot of credit in that area. So maybe it was just a system thing. I mean, he's playing with Sam Darnold in Carolina. It might be a situation where the Panthers are just kind of going, well, let's just run the ball all day. We're not going to really be using our halfbacks in the passing game that much because we don't need that much of a passing game because we have a powerful rushing attack. Spotrac has a contract projection for him, too, of 1 year, $3.5 million. And again, given that he almost had 1,000 yards last year and was relatively efficient, it seems low, but again, the running back market, it feels like it might be turning into like, it's not exactly like the quarterback market. It has some similarities, though, where you have these guys at the top who get paid the big bucks, and then there's not much of a middle class. It just kind of falls off a cliff. I wouldn't be surprised if Foreman gets like 1 year, $4 million or $4.5 million, but I'd be okay with that too. All right, moving on down the list here, another guy would be Boston Scott. This guy has been in Philly for a little while here. Now, Boston Scott is a much smaller guy. He's 5'6". He's really, really short. He's not necessarily super light or anything, but he's a smaller guy. I don't know if he has the kind of power that I would prefer to complement Ken Walker. But as a player, you might want to have him around. He's been relatively productive over the last 4 years for Philadelphia. Nothing over the top, but that also means he doesn't have a ton of miles on him. He's got less than 350 career touches. He's never had more than, I believe, like 100. I think 1 year he had like 110 touches. So not a lot of wear and tear. He's only going to be 28. And I think that when you take a look at the effectiveness he's managed to display so far in his career in limited action, it's pretty easy to translate that and say, hey, this guy could actually be something a little more notable if you gave him more opportunities to do so. I mean, at the very least, it seems like he could be a pretty good third down back, right? You put him out there as a third down back, his pass catching ability has, throughout parts of his career at least, been very notable, and that could give you something that Ken Walker, well, I mean, he seems like he's an okay pass catcher, but that might not be his specialty. PFF wasn't in love with his 2022 or anything, but it's not a bad grade. And again, we're not looking for a super duper star. They've liked previous seasons. He's had a little bit more, by the way. And Spotrac thinks he's going to get paid basically the veteran minimum. They give him 1 year, $1.1 million. So can't go that wrong. I'm trying to build a running back stable that is robust and deep. I'm not trying to get one super duper star. We need depth here. Boston Scott could absolutely add to that depth here. Next name, Samaje Perine, whatever. Anyway, had a relatively prolific career so far. Not that old yet. He's only going to be 28 this year. He was good for Washington for 1 year, and then he kind of floated around the league, and then he found a pretty good backup role in Cincinnati these last couple of years. Over the last 2 years, he's become a really prolific pass catcher. Last year, he had 38 receptions, which is notable because he was a backup running back and only got 95 actual carries. So another guy who is just going to quietly do his business, do his job, chug through, give you relatively efficient play, relatively effective play, nothing over the top, but he's young enough to where it should be pretty reasonable to say that, hey, he's not going to just suddenly fall off a cliff at 28, especially because you look at his career, he's got about 500 career touches. To me, that's the most important thing. As a player, when you get to a certain amount of touches as a running back, it's just like game over at a certain point. PFF liked what he did in 2022 quite a bit. They gave him a pretty good grade. And you go back to the previous year, it's still okay. It's not great or anything. It's nothing special, but we're not looking for necessarily anything over the top special here. After all, according to Spotrac, there's a reason why you might only have to pay $3 million to get him. 1 year, $3 million for a guy like Samaje Perine? Sure. I'll pay that much for a backup running back, and when knowing that, again, the goal is to make a robust stable of running backs, not one super duper star running back. So Samaje Perine is 1 year, $3 million. I'm definitely interested in doing that. So that would be one of the last guys I would look at. This last guy, however, I think is maybe the most interesting sleeper. It's D'Ernest Johnson. This dude right here has done some pretty notable things in his career. 2021, it seemed like he was on the ascent. He got a decent amount of burn in Cleveland. Now, he is playing in Cleveland with a really good run-blocking offensive line. He's playing behind Nick Chubb, but he was effective. He was very efficient, decent pass catcher. He was a lot of positive things for Cleveland in 2021. It seemed like he was an ascendant player, but then you remember he's on the Browns, and they've got so many running backs in front of him that there just wasn't any action for him. He got 4 touches in 2022. He basically skipped the season. He, for all intents and purposes, did not play, but it didn't seem like it was a problem with him. It was just a problem with the fact that Cleveland's running back depth chart is so deep with Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So D'Ernest Johnson is entering free agency, having done very little in the most recent year, but he just turned 27, so he's got gas left. PFF, if you go back to 2021, this was the year he kind of burst onto the scene. They really liked him. They gave him an overall grade of 81, running grade of over 90. So they really liked him, D'Ernest Johnson. So it seems to me, clearly, there is something interesting and positive here, and it was just a bad situation for him. And I think that bad situation is going to depress his value a little bit, but I think that this is also an opportunity as a team to get somebody who is undervalued. So Spotrac says 2 years, $5.3 million, so $2.6 million a year approximately, 2.6, 2.7. Yeah, that's exciting to me, honestly. Looking at what this guy did in 2021, yeah, I would pay that much money for him. That's a little bit more than veteran minimum, but when you compare him to the cost of other players who might not be any better, like Jamaal Williams or Donta Foreman, don't get me wrong, I like those guys, but this guy might be better than him, and he'll be cheaper just because he didn't get opportunities in 2022. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you need to be looking for as a team, right? All right, so those are my most, the first crop of interesting free agent running backs. And again, we're not trying to go over the top here. We don't need the greatest running back in the league. We don't need to build this stable of like Adrian Peterson and Sean Alexander and LaDainian Tomlinson. We don't need to spend $30 million on running backs. But we need a grouping of them who are at least capable. And I think that these guys have all proven to at least be capable. And I think they would all make reasonably priced additions to the Seahawks team. Another video later today with more of them. Let me know what you guys think down below. Go Hawks. And, yep, even if this team brings back Rashad Penny, we could use a free agent running back and maybe a rookie running back. Don't rule it out. Don't rule it out. Go Hawks.